Hey, what's up, folks? Lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers here, joined by fellow Lifetime Longhorn, the prodigy, CJ Vogel, and we're here for your way too early preseason breakdown and preview. And I say way too early. We're fast approaching the season. We're 3 weeks away, all right, from game one. But we're talking about the Arkansas Razorbacks today. Longhorns got to make that trip to Fayetteville to go to Arkansas. Last time they went to Fayetteville, didn't work out. And I will say this, Sark said at the SEC Media Days, and it was a brilliant quote, CJ. This is something that Longhorn fans who are kind of long-time Longhorn fans who remember the Arkansas rivalry from the old, obviously from the old days, back in the day, Southwest Conference days. They always said that Arkansas hated Texas more than they loved themselves. Sark broke out the quote at SEC Media Days. Well done. It was good. Hell, Sam Pittman actually even agreed with him. Like, yeah, I think you might be right about that.
I was shocked. I didn't think he would do that, Rod.
He backed him up. And I'll say this, CJ, and people won't like it, but that works, guys. Hating Texas more than you love yourself, it works. You can say what you want, but I don't think – listen, think about the last few times that Texas played Arkansas and them hating Texas more than they love themselves. It's worked out for them, hasn't it?
It did. Both times.
Exactly. Are you sure thinking about the last few times they played? I played Arkansas. When I was a freshman, we played Arkansas in the Cotton Bowl. We lost because Arkansas was hating Texas more than they loved themselves. Okay? If you watch any Star Wars movies, they call it the Force. The Force is just the power of hate and love. All right. And the dark side of the Force is just as powerful as the other side of the Force. All right. And that's basically what Arkansas works with, the dark side of the Force. They truly hate Texas. And when you go there, it's different going to and this is something Texas is going to learn this year, going to play your rival at their place. Now, Texas didn't have to do that with Texas, Oklahoma. You go to a neutral site. They're just getting back to Texas A&M rivalry. So it's been a while. And I think that 2021 was the first taste of that for Sark. Playing your rival at their place. Different monster altogether. Emotionally charged environment, CJ. And this thing about emotion, some guys play great feeding off emotion. Some guys don't. Some guys actually it hurts their ability to process and to execute because they're not used to playing with emotion. Coaches always say, play with emotion, don't play emotional. There's some guys that play emotional. That's why this game
in on them a little bit. Yeah,
exactly. Listen, Texas is a better team than Arkansas, but guys, when you play your rival, you cannot account for that emotional charge you're going to have in that environment.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. On top of playing in tough environments, Rod, in day of social media, you're going to hear a lot of noise, a lot of outside noise. So while we talked about Florida and whether or not to expect Billy Napier to be on the sideline when they head to DKR this fall, it's also worth wondering whether or not Sam Pittman and that staff will be on the sideline when Texas heads up to Fayetteville. That's a big talking point right now. He was kind of on that, that edge of being fired or being retained. They did retain him for this year. But you saw a lot of attrition from a year ago, right? Your quarterback departs for UCF. Your running back departs for South Carolina. Now, the two faces in which Arkansas heavily relied on to beat Texas in 2021, that's Rocket Sanders and that's KJ Jefferson, are gone. That familiarity with the system, that's gone. So, again, kind of wondering whether or not you'll have a head coach this late in the season against Texas. After, again, that seat's very hot, Rod. I don't want to say he's gone for sure by then, but that's probably a 1-1, 1-2, like hottest seats in the entire country right now is Sam Pittman's at Arkansas. So it'll be interesting, again, how that season's kind of going, how much they have to play for as well. If they're already eliminated from bowl contention, well, I don't think it'll matter how loud that crowd gets, how enthusiastic or passionate that fan base is. I think those players at the end of the day will be out of it. They know their coach is gone. They know they won't have anything to play for at the end of the year. Now, if they do, on the other hand, and they're playing for a berth to lock up a bowl spot, whatever it might be, now you're looking at a dangerous dog. And, that's scary, especially, again, we saw it in 2021. Arkansas is going to have guys, whether or not they see, that win-loss column kind of reflect where they want to be, they're going to have some talent. We've talked about that for sure. I believe the Shrine Bowl released 14 names from Arkansas this year that had NFL futures, that they were scouting for next year's NFL draft. So that's, again, whether they're good or bad, they're going to have talent.
Yep, no doubt. Actually, my man Matt Miller threw this out there a couple of weeks ago. He said Arkansas is a good case in point as to how deep the NFL draft is going to be in 2025. He said Arkansas has 19 players on his personal scouting watch list. And Matt Miller does a good job doing draft analysis for ESPN. He said that means 19 players who've been tabbed as NFL caliber by scouts and coaches. Getting back, he said Arkansas has 26 players who are draft eligible. So I know they're considered bottom, basement dwellers, if you will, in the SEC. But like you said, they do have talent, which we'll get to in a second. And one thing you were just talking about there that I want to get into, how different the team is from that 2021 team. One thing that 2021 Arkansas team had that really, I think, gave them a schematic advantage. They ran that three high safety defense, which, obviously Barry Odom is gone now, so they don't run that. And they also ran that veer and shoot with Kendall Browse, which basically go look at Sark's record versus the veer and shoot and versus three high safety teams. It's not necessarily great. It's not bad, but those are two schemes that have been really effective in countering Sark's philosophy in terms of his roster construction and program building. So you don't have to worry about that anymore. Now, let's get right to it, because I think you're right, man, about the fact that Sam Pittman's seat is so hot. He may not even be the head coach for Arkansas when they play Texas. You could have an interim head coach. A lot of people believe if that happens, the interim coach is already in place now. That it could be Bobby Petrino. The offense was so bad last year, and it was one of the worst offenses, third worst offense in the SEC. Big reason why they went 4-8 last year. They basically overhauled the entire offensive staff. They brought in Bobby Petrino to be the offensive coordinator, but he brought in his own running backs coach, brought in a new wide receivers coach, and from what I've heard, Sam Pittman himself, the head coach, is the one who picked out the offensive line coach. And I believe his name is Eric Mateo is his name, the new offensive line coach, got rid of the old offensive line coach. And apparently this guy, Eric Mateo, he was a GA at one point under Pittman when they were both with Brett Bielema. So there's some familiarity there, and they've overhauled it. So you have a new system, that Bobby Petrino system, and a brand new quarterback. How about this for the quarterback, though? Just doing some research. I did hear that Bobby Petrino was really high on Taylon Green, the quarterback out of Boise State that's transferring to Arkansas. So high, in fact, on him, CJ, that the first offer that this young man Green received out of high school was from Bobby Petrino at Missouri State. So he liked him that much. He really liked him. And then when he had a chance to handpick his quarterback, once he got a new gig, he handpicked the guy he gave the first offer to for Taylon Green out of high school was Bobby Petrino. So he really likes this young man, and he's explosive, man, as a runner. As a runner, he can go. As a passer, he's not really a nuanced passer, but a threat, as a dual threat runner, he really can provide not only a spark, man. He can go in fuego on your defense.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting, right? You talk about Bob, kind of I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this here, Rod. Sam Pittman's got a type at quarterback. I think that's the route I wanted to go.
He does. Yeah,
you look at what KJ Jefferson was in the frame that he had, right? Yep. He's a big body. He's able to move and make plays with his legs. Taylon Green's very similar to that. And I was looking up his measurables earlier. How about 6'6", 225? So very much a similar build to what you saw and what Texas saw with KJ Jefferson. I would say even more so, a similar style of quarterback, right? He will beat you with his legs, has 900 rushing yards over the last 2 seasons. It's interesting, though, if you're able to take away his run game and keep him in the pocket, I think that's what you want him to do, right? Yep, you want him throwing the football. 11 touchdowns, 9 interceptions a year ago at Boise State. Those numbers aren't what's going to sit there and really put fear in defensive coordinators' minds, especially when you can add a really, really, quick, effective, talented, elite, whatever adjective you want to use with this Texas edge rush, saying, oh, yeah, if you're going to drop back Taylon Green and sit there and expect to move the ball against our edge rushers, good luck. Go ahead. So I do envision Texas selling out to stop the run. That's, again, you talk about the struggles Arkansas had a year ago. Well, it was KJ Jefferson with 420 yards that led Arkansas in rushing yards a year ago. So I know that offensive line is going to be looking a little bit different this year. Sam Pittman's going to be more hands-on, as he should be, right? He comes from an offensive line background at Georgia prior to getting hired at Arkansas. He was widely considered to be one of the best offensive line coaches in all of the country. So this has to be his baby in 2024. For Arkansas to have any hope, it's got to be something that he has all hands on working to get that offensive line ready to protect Taylon Green. And how about this, Rod? to create running lanes for who? Jaquindon Jackson. How about that?
That rings a bell. That rings a bell. Yeah,
it sure does, doesn't it? So he had quite the career at Utah. Now looking to be that number one guy at Arkansas this year as well. It'll be interesting to see what kind of season he has leading up to Texas. But we certainly know that he's a guy that you're going to have to game plan around and scheme against. He's a very talented back.
No doubt. I mean, he averaged over 5 yards per carry in his career there, switching from quarterback to running back at Utah. The truth is, with the combined running threat of Taylon Green, and listen, I think I agree with you about the KJ Jefferson comp, because he does remind you of a big quarterback, not necessarily an elite nuanced passer. I think completing less than 60% of his passes for his career, but I think he's a little faster. He was clocked at 22 miles per hour. He's got 3 70-plus yard runs in the last 2 years, Taylon Green does. And he has 36 explosive runs in the last 2 years, according to Pro Football Focus. But he was 120th in pass grade by Pro Football Focus. So to your point, keep him in the pocket. You keep him in the pocket, and he's a much I think he's a much less formidable threat overall. And I think that's what they're going to do. But I would say between him and Jaquindon Jackson, they could have a really, I think, a really dominant running game potentially, Arkansas. And that's what they want to get back to. Arkansas wants to get back to where they can run the ball. I mean, the Hogs, right? They really want to get back to being able to run the football. And it starts up front. You talked about it. They do return 2 starters on the offensive line. Joshua Braun, I believe is his name, and Patrick Kutas. I hope I got his name right. But the guys they brought in are projected starters. They brought in 2 transfers that are projected to start at tackle for them, left and right tackle. Fernando Carmona projected to start at left tackle. Keyshawn Blackstock expected to start at right tackle for them. They brought in Addison Nichols, who they say could start at guard or center for them. And they believe that's going to be a really an exponential improvement on the offensive line. And they got to get, in 2021 when Texas played there, I'm just looking back at how formidable their run game was, CJ. I mean, they ran for in 2022, they ran for close to 3,100 yards and 27 touchdowns in 2022, averaged over 5 yards per carry in 21 and 22. But in 2023, it
hit the fan, Rod. It hit the fan hard in 23. It was a disaster. And Rocket Sanders is a big part of that. That's Raheem Sanders. Again, he transferred to South Carolina. He was a big part of that rushing identity for Arkansas over the past few years under Sam Pittman. When he went down a year ago with an injury, and Arkansas lost everything with that offense, right? They couldn't move the rock. They couldn't run the ball. Again, I mentioned 420 yards was the leading rusher for Arkansas a year ago, and that was KJ Jefferson. That was their quarterback, a guy in which they probably would have preferred not to have to run as often as they did. I have some numbers here on their points per game, their yards per game. It's not pretty, Rod, I'll tell you that. 83rd in points per game, 23.9. 101st in yards per game. Again, just an offense that just can't move the ball for an offensive head coach in Sam Pittman that specializes in offensive line. That can't be acceptable again. And that's why his seat is so hot. Luckily, and I wanted to focus on their wide receivers, and I think they have a really talented tight end as well.
I agree.
One last note on Blackstock. He's a top 115 prospect in the 2022 class, originally at Michigan State. So he can play some ball. He's a good prospect right now. But I wanted to focus on their wide receivers a little bit. Andrew Armstrong's a top 10 wide receiver in the SEC. I'll say that. They brought him
like that, huh?
Days.
Okay.
He's tremendous. A little bit of a larger body, can stretch the field vertically, can get the contested catches, the tight, tightly contested catches, whatever it might be. He's really talented. Isaiah Segtania, another speedster. I mean, a guy that big-time track kid in high school. I believe he ran 10.2, 10.3 in the 100-meter. Was originally, I believe, committed to Texas A&M before flipping late over to Arkansas. So that's a guy to watch out for. They got their big body, big play, and then as well as a speedster to go alongside there. But Luke Haas is the guy that's really interesting to me. That's a guy that Oklahoma was very heavily invested in coming out of his recruitment. Arkansas stole him away from the home school, got him on campus. He's probably one of the top tight ends in the SEC that Texas will face this year. So they got some weapons right there. It's all, to me, what that offensive line will look like moving forward.
I honestly totally agree with you, CJ. I think you hit the nail on the head. And I even think they're going to try to, if they can establish a ground game, you're going to get just a a team that wants to pound the rock, and take deep shots. Pound the rock, take deep shots. Because it kind of fits the quarterback a little bit too. Pound the rock and just take deep shots. He's not worried about his accuracy as much. He's not a nuanced thrower. He doesn't throw to different, levels of the field really well, short to intermediate. But his deep ball, actually not bad. So I'm with you. Think about the size of the receivers. Going back to what kind of that philosophy, right? If you want to just chunk it deep after forcing teams to load the box to stop your run, they got Andrew Armstrong. You said he was what, 6'4"? 6'4" speedster. This is the thing, guys. He's a 6'4" speedster. He was clocked at Andrew Armstrong 21.9 miles per hour, actually. And this guy can score touchdowns too. I was going back to his time at Texas A&M Commerce. He tied for 6th in the FCS with 13 receiving touchdowns that year. Then made the jump to the SEC and had like over 700 receiving yards. So he's trending in the right direction. But 6'4" speedster, 21.9 miles per hour. Same thing with Satania. You just talked about him. He's been basically considered uncoverable actually in practice. A lot of insiders in Arkansas predicting he's going to have a huge leap year this year. Then there's Tyrone Broden. This dude's listed at 6'7". I'm not joking. That's crazy. And by the way, he can run. According to reports, they clocked him at 22 miles per hour. At that size, like that's freakish. So there's big guys who can run. I don't even know if they're elite, elite pass catchers or elite route runners, but they're big and can run. So if they get one-on-ones, 50-50 balls, I can see them just chunking it up to these guys.
Absolutely.
Yep. So I think that's where they want to be. I don't know if that's where they can accomplish it, but I think that's where they want to be. And I'm with you. Luke Haas, I think he's one of the best tight ends in the country, actually. I think he's one of the best. Well, if you're on the best tight end in the SEC,
but I'm with you.
Yeah, I think he can be a real problem for Texas. So the offense, I think the offense has got some. It's got some promise.
There's some promise there. I'll admit that.
Yeah, the O-line is probably. You're right. That's going to be the business. If the O-line comes together, watch out. Arkansas could make some noise. And also, they got to get better at winning one-score games. Remember when they went 9-4. I think that was 2021. They beat Texas. They were 2-2 in one-score games. Then that was big for them. Since then, they've been 2-9 in one-score games. And that's because they can't score, to your point. Right. They're going to win a one-score game if you can't score. Let's talk about their defense, because they changed defensive coordinators last year, right? After Barry Odom left, they changed defense coordinators. Travis Williams, who's going to be in his second year at Arkansas. I like him. I'm going to tell you straight up, I like him. They had one of the better pass defenses in the SEC last season. They do return a lot of starters. 7 starters return on defense for them. And last year, just to give you some background on Travis Williams, the new DC, they dropped their total yards allowed last season, total defense, by 108 per game. They dropped their pass defense by an average of 92 yards per game. They were averaging, I think they were giving up like 294 passing yards per game. They were one of the worst in college football 2 years ago. And then they turned out to be one of the better pass defenses in the SEC last season. I like his system overall, and he's got a lot to work with, CJ.
Yeah, he does. It starts up front, right? You look at Landon Jackson, one of the top edge rushers in the SEC. He's going to be the guy that Texas points to and says, wherever he's at on the field, we got to stop him, right? Number 40 in red, figure out where he's at, get him, limit him, chip him, whatever you can to prevent him from getting to Quinn Ewers. That's going to be the big goal. I actually really like their cornerback duo, Rod. And I do think it's going to be freshman Solomon Bridges that ends up being that guy opposite of Jalen Braxton, a kid out of the Frisco Lone Star, who I thought was severely underrated by the services and his offers coming out of high school. He's been a guy that started at Arkansas since he arrived originally as a true freshman. I think they're going to do the same with Solomon Bridges, who Texas fans are very familiar with. 6'4", very lengthy, can run well, a guy that I'm looking at to start opposite of him. That's really, to me, if you have a great edge rusher and you have competent cornerbacks, you have the pieces there to put together a pretty good defense. And like you said, I mean, the points per game a year ago, maybe not great, just a tick under 30 points per game allowed, but there was improvement, right? They were 83rd in the country. It wasn't great, but the yards per game, that to me tells me that, it was just a few drives that got away from Arkansas defensively, right? 360 yards per game allowed in 2023. It's good for 43rd. For a school like Arkansas, wow. You want that, right? You want to be in the middle of the pack. Yards allowed, eventually points allowed will dip down into that range as well in my eyes. The big issues for Arkansas, They have to do a better job of taking balls away from opponents, and they have to do a better job of holding on to the football, right? They were 108th in turnover margin, and they were 106th in turnovers forced per game with only 1.1. That's not good. That's where you lose football games. And Rod, to your point, that's where you lose those one-score games. So Arkansas is not elite in many defensive categories. I'd say they're pretty good in a few, right? Pass defense, not a strength a year ago. But I do think their cornerbacks will be better this year. Where they're best at, again, this goes back to Landon Jackson. This goes back to some of that edge room in which he's going to draw a lot of attention, open up a little bit of that pass rushing lanes for guys like Cameron Ball, Eric Gregory, the guys on the interior, those nose and defensive tackles. They were 38th in sacks per game. That, again, may not sound like a very daunting number there. But, again, for a school like Arkansas, who's going to be chippy, kind of, have to scratch and claw their way to victories, that's how you do it. With negative plays, turnovers, whatever it can be to force and make Quinn Ewers, pretty uncomfortable there in the pocket.
Yeah, I like their defensive line. I really do. I think they make a lot of plays. And I think Landon Jackson actually, if he wants to, I think he's got some projections. Second-round pick could be a first-round pick, depending on how he tests out and how they
very high ceiling.
Yeah, exactly. He hasn't really, to me, come close to reaching his pass rushing ceiling. I think he's an elite, actually, run stuffer. You go look at him as a run stopper. That's what he does really, really well. He had just 6.5 sacks last year. But I went and looked at the tackles for loss or no gain by just the defensive line, talking about D tackles and edge defenders. The Arkansas Razorbacks had 41. That was second in the SEC, second most in the SEC by they in terms of them, making some plays, just in terms of defensive line, just from that defensive line, they were pretty good there. And 4 of the 5 starters on the defensive line, or at least 4 of the 5 players on the D line who played 300 snaps at least, they returned. And I like Cameron Ball on that D line. Eric Gregory's a good player for them. They really, I think, are going to have to make some adjustments and acclimate to the losses they have at linebacker. They lost basically their leading tackler at linebacker, really good player for them, Jaheim Thomas, and they lost, I think they call him Pooh Paul. I think his name actually is Chris Paul, if I'm not mistaken, but they lost him too, really good. So they lost their 2 starting linebackers. Yeah. That's a problem. They got a young man in from Georgia. I think his name is Xavier Sori. He is, like some people say, projected to be a starter for them. They also, Stephen Diggs, another transfer they got in. He's getting some first-team reps. There are 2 other guys I've been reading about, Anthony Switzer and Larry Worth. They're more hybrids, if you will, that can play safety and linebacker for them. But they don't have depth at safety, but I like their 2 safeties. I like James Johnson. I like Hudson Clark are the 2 safeties, I believe.
I'll tell you this. You know how at times it feels like guys who expend all of their eligibility are around schools for a decade, right? For a while it felt like Blake Gideon was at Texas for forever. Brock Cunningham on the basketball court, they have a 6 year, 7 years,
Most
whatever. It
was like that forever in Texas.
That's Hudson Clark to Arkansas. I swear he's been there since I graduated high school. He's been at Arkansas secondary for this has to be his 6th year. It has. I'm
gonna look it up because I didn't know, but you're right. I've been thinking. I think you might be right about that, brother. I'm gonna go look it up. When did he come in? Let's see. Let's check this.
But
out.
I mean, that's an important piece to have, right? We've talked about it, Rod. Just to have that experience, that leadership that is so highly coveted in many defenses.
Came in 2019. You're right. Came in 2019, CJ. And
he started right away. I believe his first game as an Arkansas Razorback, he had 3 interceptions. So he was Arkansas Player of the Week right away. I don't know. But he's been there for a long time. He's going to be the focal point on that defense. Probably, I would assume right now, if he's playing the middle of the field for Arkansas this fall, he'll be that guy with the green dot calling the defense. Yes. I would assume.
Good point.
I've not heard that, whatever, but I would assume that's the guy because he's been there so long, familiar with the defense that way.
And did he start out? Did he start off as a walk-on?
He's from Highland Park, I believe. I believe so.
I want to say he earned his scholarship as a walk-on. Like he's legit. Like that's dude. Trust me, that is the hardest thing. That's one of the hardest things. It's like trying to make a squad in the NFL as an undrafted free agent. There's nothing really harder than earning a Power 5 scholarship, right? As a walk-on, because they'd rather give it to a guy coming out of high school or a guy coming out of the portal. You force their hand. If you're a walk-on, you force their hand. You force your way on the field, earn them reps, and they were like, "We got to get this dude a scholarship, man, because he's one of our better players." So yeah, congrats to him, man. That's the hard way to do it. He's a really good player. All right, there you go. Special teams. just really quickly, we won't dive too deep into it. We don't talk a ton of special teams on the show, but a little synopsis here. They're going to have Satania is supposed to be their return specialist. We talked about him at wide receiver. The punter, Max Fletcher, who ranked 7th nationally with damn near 47-yard average last year. He transferred, and I think that means Devin Bell is going to be the starting role for the punter there. They also have to replace their kicker, Cam Little, who left I think he left after his junior year, and he was the most accurate field goal kicker in school history. That guy's gone. And Matthew Shipley and the kickoff specialist, I believe his name is Vito Calaveruso. I'm sure I screwed that name up, but they're supposed to be the kickoff specialist and, of course, the field goal specialist for.
Well, there you go.
So there you go.
It is interesting seeing that kind of transition to having a place kicker and a kickoff guy, right?
Yes, that's a good point.
That's weird, right? I know Texas does it with Will Stone and Bert Auburn, but to see more schools kind of catch on to that trend, maybe I don't know.
I wonder with the roster limit, are we going to see more of that? They like to change now from the scholarship limit to the roster limit. I wonder if you'll see more like, all right, well, we can afford to. But do you want to do that, or is that kind of a waste of a scholarship? They got I don't know. The NFL does.
It will be interesting if college football adopts that NFL kickoff rule where you got to land it in between the 20 and the end zone. Yes. Maybe you see kids or a school kind of prioritize a kickoff specialist more right? Yeah. Maybe they're on to something. Otherwise, hey, I can trot out there and boot a ball, through the back of the end zone and get free school. That'd be great. That's what my kid's going to be doing.
Yeah, that's a great point. You're right about that. Sark was asked about that actually last week, if he thought that they would the college football would take the NFL approach to the kickoff return. And he said he doesn't know. He did say he went to a camp, though, a training camp to witness it, witness teams practice it. And I'm curious to know what training camps he went to. He has that follow-up question to Sark one day. All right, good stuff there, CJ. We got Kentucky coming up next week. We'll break down the Kentucky Wildcats for our way too early preseason preview of the Texas football schedule. Thank you very much, CJ. Appreciate all that you do. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you guys for listening and watching. And for the On Texas Football family, for CJ Vogel, I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Until next time, hook 'em horn.